welcome to Microsoft 365 Saturday Madrid, the virtual version, and this session, which is building your SharePoint intranet in 2020. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Matt Weston. I'm a Microsoft MVP from the United Kingdom, and I'm the Managing Director of a small consultancy in the Midlands called Advantage 365 Limited. I'm as active as I can be on Twitter and also on LinkedIn, so please do feel free to reach out and communicate with me on those mediums. Or I have my blog at blog.mattweston365.com. I also try and do a lot of work in the community in the UK, so I try and support the SharePoint Saturday events there. But I also run a couple of user groups. I run one which is dedicated to Office 365 and SharePoint, and I also run the local Black Country Power Apps and Power Automate user group. So I try and cover as many technologies as possible because that gives me as much of a rounded approach to a lot of my projects and the way that I approach problems. But before we get into the detail of today's session, let's first of all thank the sponsors who have stuck by the event, because without them, then none of this is really possible. So thank you to everybody who sponsored the event, and we'll make sure that we give you some love in order to make this worth your while as well. So thank you from the heart for helping us through this. So I think it's fair to say that really SharePoint is an evolving product. And if we think right the way back to the way it's changed over such a number of years, it's changed massively from where it was back in the early 2000s to certainly where we are now. I mean, there's 20 years of advanced technology that has gone into building SharePoint in the guise that we know it and the way that we use it now. And if we compare that to, for example, 2003, 2007, 2010, even 2013, where we really needed to do a lot of work in order to make a SharePoint intranet even look and behave vaguely like what we'd actually wanted to do. So writing a lot of master pages, a lot of custom HTML, a lot of custom code just to actually get some very basic, nice looking pages out of the product to make it suitable for what our users actually need. Even 2016, to an extent, the fact that I still need to write custom master pages, it's still in what's called the classic experience. So there's quite a lot of work that still goes into making a graphically pleasing, an interactive and engaging intranet. And there were a number of customizations that we could employ through that whole, through each of those products. We could employ either server-side code to actually allow us to go and do things. We could deploy our own web parts, master pages. And then as we got into SharePoint 2010 and beyond, we could also do the JavaScript injection in order to help us create a better user experience. But all of that lived very much in the realm of a SharePoint developer. So what we see now with SharePoint Online and the new modern experience, and to an extent this lives in SharePoint 2019 as well, we actually see a lot more ways that we can build an engaging site. And it's not now just down to a SharePoint administrator to be able to do this. It's designed very much in a way to empower the users to go and create the content themselves. And what we're going to do over the course of the next 45 minutes is really look at the experience for creating an intranet in SharePoint Online. And we're also going to focus on a number of the key new features that really make this possible and make this one of the best products out there for actually building our intelligent intranet. But before I really dive into the ins and outs of the actual SharePoint product itself and I get lost in demo land, let's actually first of all have a chat about why SharePoint actually makes an extremely good platform to base an intranet. Now, the big thing for me is that SharePoint is embedded into my Office 365 environment. Because it's in Office 365, it then becomes part of the whole Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So that comes with a number of huge benefits. So I can have that single sign-on or that seamless sign-on experience where I can have a fully integrated solution based around SharePoint and all the other services that we have within Office 365, all without having to go through multiple logins. And I can use the same logon as what I use to log into my Windows 10 machine. So I can have that full end-to-end experience, really starting from Windows 10 all the way through SharePoint into Microsoft 365. So it's nice to have everything all controlled under one umbrella and be able to access all that in one go. From a data governance point of view, I know that all of the data that gets stored within my intranet is stored within my Office 365 tenancy. And so therefore I know where that data is stored. I know exactly which region it's in. So for example, at the moment I can migrate all of my services to the UK tenancies. So I know that everything is going to be stored within the UK sovereign territory. And I can make sure that any governance that gets applied to my tenancy is also going to be applied to my intranet. So I don't have to worry about breaches as much because it's all part and parcel of that bubble that's provided by Office 365 and Microsoft 365. But from an end user point of view, the actual design element of SharePoint Online for an intranet is absolutely fantastic. So everything that I do within the browser, in terms of putting web parts on the page, in terms of mixing my layout so that I can have a number of different design aspects to my sites, they all are immediately mobile responsive. So I don't have to worry about creating one rendition for a browser, one rendition for a mobile, one rendition for a tablet. It will work across all devices, and all I really need to worry about as a user is the quality of the content that's going in there in the first place. But if we build on top of that everything that we know about Microsoft 365, so the Microsoft 365 search elements, the Project Cortex elements that are coming through that are going to allow us to really enrich our metadata and build that into our intranet as well, there's a lot of potential for what we can achieve just by using SharePoint out of the box. And the key thing to understand is that I can also extend SharePoint out of the box using SharePoint frameworks, using some third-party intranet products that are out there in order to plug into here as well. So I can always extend this as long as I'm sat within the SharePoint framework, the SharePoint bubble, the actual SharePoint pages themselves, then everything will still work in the way that I expect it to. But what do I personally want from an intranet? And this obviously changes from person to person. So if I'm using an intranet, there's a few things that I really want. First of all, if I want that engagement and I want something to keep me going back, then I want to read content that is relevant to me. Yes, I want to read the global communications. However, probably for the most part, I'm not massively interested in everything that comes out. Whereas if there are things that are specific to the area that I work in or my region, then I'm likely to keep coming back. So I want stuff that's relevant. I want it to be really easy to navigate around. There's nothing that drives me mad more than not being able to find the information that I want, or having to drill down through multiple levels of links and sites in order just to find the information that I want. So I want it to be really easy, but I also want to be able to have that consistent feel around all of my sites. So for example, if I go down into one site, I want to easily be able to find my way into another site. And having that consistency is one of those key things that, again, engages me as an intranet user. And the most important one for me is that I want the intranet to be based around me. Everybody has different expectations of what they want to see. I personally like to see my personal news, my documents, the stuff that my personal sites. And that's one of the reasons why I really like the Office 365 portal homepage. I like the SharePoint landing page, because everything that I see on there uses the graph and therefore changes based on what I'm working on at that time. So it will show me my frequent sites, my recent documents, and that will keep me coming back to an intranet, because I then see that as my way of being able to find the things that I want to get back to quite quickly. But obviously there's a lot of requirements there, and probably they're quite complex for a lot of people. So let's really start from the basics and let's look at how I get started.
Now, one of the hardest things to do when you're trying to create an intranet is find the inspiration that you're looking for in terms of what do I need, what do my users want, what can I do? And when I speak to clients about this, the first thing that I'll reach for is what's called the SharePoint Lookbook. Now, this is a Microsoft provided website which gives you some inspiration around what you can achieve with the different types of site designs, whether it's a communication site or a team site. and just how you can configure some of the web parts that they show in their catalog as well. There's a lot of information there. So let's go and have a quick look at that. So within the SharePoint Lookbook, I have the ability to either download the PDF, so I can always have that to hand, or I can go and interactively view some of the designs. Now, the designs are broken down into the different types of sites that I could potentially look at. Is it an organizational level site? Is it a department site? Is it a team site? Yeah, that I can go on. I'm going to look at the organizational site, and one of my favorite templates that I've got up here is what's called the perspective. The reason why I like this template is because it pulls together a number of customizations that I think a lot of companies really look to implement when they're creating an intranet. It has the communication aspect, so it has the ability for a company to push out their news, to push out their latest information, to push out their events and so on. But as we see when I actually show you this created on the screen, you'll see there's a lot of personalization on there as well, which is really important to keep the users coming back to that page, like I've already said. So let's have a quick look around this site before I really get into the nuts and bolts of what's on there. So I have a visualization of what the site looks like, so I can see all the different components that are on the screen. But what it also breaks it down on the left-hand side is, how do I build the site? How do I build that? Because I like the look of it, what do I do to get it? And so it talks you through each of the site features that are used. So for example, the theme, the vertical section, which is this full-length section that runs down the right-hand side. The mega menu, which is the navigation method, which we'll see in a moment. And also down to the web parts that are being used. So for example, how do I create the news carousel? So I can click on the news, and it will then take me to a page which tells me how to use the news web part and how I can achieve the different effects that have been created on that page. So in terms of SharePoint documentation, there's a lot of information that's there now to help guide you through this whole new world of modern SharePoint. But the nice thing is that if I come back to my lookbook, if I carry on scrolling down, if I'm a SharePoint tenant admin, I have the ability to add this template to my own site. So rather than me going and creating that whole site manually, I can tell the lookbook to go to my site and create it for me. So if I click on Add to Tenant, then what it will do is it will ask me for some basic information. It will ask me for a site title. It will ask me for a site URL. And then it will, using a provisioning engine, it will take everything that's on that site, everything that's on that page, and provision that into my tenancy for me, so I can then go and start using it. So if I hit provision, it will validate, and it will then go away and start creating that site for me. So provisioning takes approximately 5 minutes when I'm provisioning from the lookbook. But what it will give me is a fully fledged working communication site for me to go and start either working with or using it as a learning process. I can come and interact with all aspects of this page now. So let's have a look at some of the key components that have been put on this page that I think are worth knowing about, so that you can take these forward into your new intranets. First is the mega menu. In SharePoint, we would usually have had a standard cascading menu. However, the community kept saying, we want mega menus, we want mega menus. And in the past, we went away and we wrote them ourselves. But they are now baked into SharePoint Online. So when I have multi-tiered navigation, especially in the header, it will group them together. And then it will allow me to go and have my links grouped together under those headers. So it looks and feels a lot nicer than a standard cascading menu. And the editing experience for that, again, is very, very simple. I can click edit, and then if I want a new link, I literally just press add the URL, and away we go. So the whole concept of everything to do with SharePoint is to keep it very, very simple. Down the bottom of the page, as well as having our header, we have a footer. Again, in the past, we would have had to resort to customizations in order to make a footer on the bottom of the page. SharePoint again does it for us. There's no need for me to go and do that. And again, I can press edit and I can add my URLs or some links directly into the footer. So I can hit save, and then I can start to build up my footer links as well as my header links. So navigation is becoming very, very key across your communication site. It's the way our users are finding their way to the content that's pertinent to them. So let's utilize as much as possible to make it as easy as possible to move around. Let's go and hit edit, and let's have a look at some of the components that are on the page. I'm going to show you some of the things that I really like, and some of the reasons why this is one of my favorite templates. So I have my news. We've already seen that. That's looking quite nice. I've got more news. Yeah, I've got different news presented in different ways, potentially from different areas, whether that's from this site or whether it's from other sites that I have access to. I've got some links to videos, I've got some text, I've got a lot of good stuff going on in the center of the page. But where I tend to get most excited is what's going on in the right-hand column. Because over here I have my news, my recent documents, my recent sites. So the whole concept of a communication site in the past was we're going to put some announcements out. If we're lucky, our employees are going to come here once a day. If the content on this page is absolutely bespoke to me, I'm going to come in here much more. The reason why I go to the Office 365 homepage so much is because that's where I can access my documents. It's where I can see what my latest sites were. And now within SharePoint Online, I can actually bring all of those onto my Intranet homepage. So rather than my users keep going back to the Office 365 portal homepage or even the SharePoint landing page, I can bring them to my SharePoint Intranet home, and I can see all the information that I want. That means that communications teams are happy because the communications that they're pushing out are constantly being seen. Users are happy because they're seeing everything in one place. So I have recent documents, and all that's showing is just the recent documents web part, and it's just showing 6 items. I have recent sites. Again, it's just using the site's web part and just pulling in the content that are frequent sites for the current user. So it's taking the person who's logged in and it's making this content centralized around them. Even news. Let's go and edit the web part. So news comes through as being recommended for the current user. So the user is logged in and they are seeing the information that is recommended for them. It could be they have news being displayed from a number of different sites, not just the communication site that they're on at the moment. But there's one more thing that that I'm starting to get really excited about. I'm just going to go and add some more news onto here. How can we have more news on this one page? So I'm going to go and add some news. I'm going to edit the web part. And I'm going to scroll down to this here, which says enable audience targeting. So this is a feature that's rolling out at the moment. And if I just click on that, then it shows that it's content that is bespoke to a user based on attributes about that user. So for example, it could be for a specific security group. It could be for a specific department. For those of you who have done audiencing in old versions of SharePoint, this is the modern incarnation of it. This is where we can now start to tailor again the content that's being displayed on the page based on the user that is logging in. So very much, for me, a modern intranet, certainly one in 2020, is one about the user being the center of the universe when they come to your homepage. Now, by default, audiencing isn't turned on. So if I go and create a new news page at the moment, let's say that I'm creating news which is for a specific audience. I can create my content. So I'll say this is just a news post for executives. And if I look at my page details, then at the moment, I have no way of really saying what this page or who this page is intended for. So I'm just going to save that as a draft for a moment, because what I need to do is go to my site contents, and I actually need to go and enable audiencing on this library. So all my pages get created in site pages, and if I go to the settings for the site pages, we're back into classic, it's still there, it still persists at the moment anyway. But if I look at audience targeting settings, and then just go and enable it. Okay, and that's all I need to do. So let's just navigate myself back up the tree. Let's go and find my page. So this is a news post for execs. If I go and look at the page details again, this time I have an audience field appear. So let's just go and edit that. So I can edit that audience. And then I could say that the only people who, or the people I want targeted for this page are executives. So then I can start to select a group to basically show bespoke content for them. That is actually quite, for me, quite exciting. And I hope you'll share that that sentiment as well, because that is a game changer again for this whole intelligent intranet that Microsoft are pushing with SharePoint Online.
So when we think about an intranet, we always think about a hierarchical site structure. Now that doesn't exist now in SharePoint Online, where whenever we create a site, they're all created at the same level. However, when we think about our navigation experience, there's always an entry point, and then that effectively means that in our heads, there's one site that's promoted above all else. And that is really what our home sites are for. They're designed to have that point of entry, that home page or that home site for our intranet. And that applies for both what I see when I use the browser on a desktop or on a laptop, but also when I use a mobile device. What is the point of entry and how can we implement that within SharePoint? Let's go and have a look.
So creating a home site is effectively creating a communication site to start off with, or another site. But what I need to do to promote it to be a home site, so it's now logically sat above all the others, is to go back to a little bit of PowerShell. So the first thing that I need to do in my PowerShell is connect to my SPO service. Now, if you try and run this and you get the command that cannot be found, just make sure that you go and install the latest version of the SharePoint Online management shell, and then all of these commands will become available to you. But I'm going to connect to my SharePoint service, and I'm going to point out to everybody, just because I always forget this to start off with, is that when you connect to the SharePoint service, you need to connect to your admin site. So that's your tenancy-admin.sharepoint.com. Once I've done that, I can run set SPO home site, and I can tell it which site I want it to be defined as the home. So I'll go and run that, and it'll ask me if I'm sure. I'll say yes, and then it will say that okay, you've now set that site to be in your home site, but it does take a little bit of a while to come through. So we're still waiting for the change to come through there. I'm just going to give it a quick refresh just to see if it's come through. No, it hasn't yet. So that's fine, because what we can do is go back to my intranet page for a moment. And I'm just going to draw your attention to a new navigation item that's now appeared on the top, on the global navigation, or in the top navigation. So we had these to start off with, but I've now got an additional link here called My SharePoint. And when I click that, that will take me back to my SharePoint homepage. If I click edit, I can go and change the display name. but it's always going to point back to my home site. So it's always going to point back to the SharePoint home. Okay, so I've just navigated back to my SharePoint homepage. I've just done a quick refresh, and it's now pulled my top navigation bar and my branding from my communication site into my SharePoint homepage. So now I've got very much a tied up experience between the SharePoint home and my intranet home. And if I click on the perspective, it will take me to my intranet page. And if I scroll down, I've also got my footer. So effectively, SharePoint Home is now part of my intranet. It's not a standalone page like it always has been before. It's now part and parcel of my whole intranet.
So while we've got standalone sites, this isn't the approach that we've got so far in terms of having that navigation just on a single site. It works quite well. But when we need to start grouping sites together logically, then we potentially need to start looking at ways that we can apply that grouping, apply a consistent global navigation across all of those sites, and even apply some branding consistency across them as well. And that's where hub sites come in, where I can associate a number of sites with effectively a hub. So think of these as hubs and spokes on a wheel. And then those characteristics from the hub then get passed down to each of the sites that get associated with it. So again, let's go and see how that manifests itself within SharePoint Online.
So hub sites, previously, again, we would have had to go into PowerShell in order to go and create a hub site. But this is one of those functions that's now been added into the SharePoint Admin Center. So I've got the SharePoint Admin Center open on another tab. If you need to get to it, you can go to your Office 365 admin, and then on the left-hand side, you'll see SharePoint. Within my SharePoint Admin Center, I'm going to come to Active Sites, and that's going to tell me all the sites that are currently active within my tenancy. And if I scroll up, there's quite a few different sites that have been created on here, but the one I'm interested in is Intranet, because that's what I want to use as the top of my hub. You don't have to do this. I've used hub sites to group together a number of projects that are all working as part of the program so that there's consistency across them. It's entirely up to you how you use your hubs, because effectively what you can do, as well as pushing information up, you can down, you can push information up, and you can really start to communicate a lot within these. So let's go and have a look at how we create the hub site. So I'm going to select the perspective, and on the bar at the top, once you've got your tick in the box, you can go and select hub. And hub allows me to do one of two things. It allows me to register as a hub site or associate with a hub. So if I go and register as a hub site, it will then ask me, okay, so what's the name of your hub? And I'm going to leave that as the perspective. And it's also asking me who can associate sites with this hub. So if I have a cut down list of people that I want, so for example, part of my team, they're the only people that can associate with a hub, then I can name those people. I'm going to set that back out for now. Let's go and hit save. And if I scroll across now, under the hub, it's now got the perspective hub site. So that's a signal that I'm now working on in our hub site. How does that change my communication site? Let's go and refresh. So what I now have is two sets of navigation. I have my hub navigation, and I have the navigation as part of my communication site. So with that link, what I've got the ability to do now is add other sites into my intranet. So if I come back to my SharePoint home, and I'm going to go and create another site, and it's going to create another communication site, and this one's going to be called HR Comms. Just hit finish on that, and within a few seconds it'll spin up into my new site. But what I can do now is click on my settings, go to my site information, and change my hub site association, and I can select perspective. So let's go and save that. And so what happens as a result of being part of the hub is it will take that hub navigation, and that will persist across all of the sites. It will also enforce the brand that comes down. And also, from a hub management perspective, I can enforce site designs out onto my sites as well. So it just gives me a lot. It gives me a lot of control over the sites that are now part of that hub. If I click on the perspective, it will take me back to the top, and I can add further links in if I need to. So if I want to put a link into communications, so that's HR comms, and let's call it HR comms. Now I can save that, and when I navigate down, that navigation then persists. So I can manage it in one place, and it goes through all of my other sites. So now that we are effectively in a hub, we've got a number of sites that are all collected together. If I go and click on Edit, and look at my news, I now have an additional option under the news source. So previously we had this site, we had selected sites and recommended. We now have sites within the hub. So that is allowing me to pull together information just from the sites that are working together in this hub collection. So again, it's just allowing different ways of being able to group information together, surfacing that information where it needs to go, so that everybody has the information at their fingertips that they need. So one of the really cool things is that now I've set that up, and I've actually created my home site as a hub site as well. So effectively I've got two tops to the same tree. So how does that then affect the experience when I actually hit my SharePoint homepage? And this is one of the things that I really like about the hub site navigation, is that not only is it persistent now across all of the sites in my hub, if I come back to my SharePoint home by clicking on the SharePoint link at the top, I also get my hub navigation appearing on my SharePoint homepage. So this is quite cool. So if I was to move all of my navigation from being here into my hub navigation, I then have a consistent global nav across all of my sites that are part of my intranet and maybe beyond that, but also on the SharePoint landing page. So everything now could have the same navigation. This is the first time in SharePoint history that we've ever had this, so I am really excited about doing this. So let's just have a look at the one last thing for the navigation then around the hub, because one of the key things that I've got on my on the top of my communication site is a mega menu. So if I come back to my perspective page, let's go and add some more links into here. So I'm going to go and call this let's make this a header, and let's call this communications teams. Let's just move that up. Let's make HR a sublink of that, and let's press save. So now I also get a mega menu look and feel on the hub site menu, as well as on the standard navigation that I get from a communication site. So that is one of the things I'm now considering a lot when I'm starting to look at intranets, how they can all link together and how I can provide that global navigation.
So the next thing we're going to look at is one of those quite small features that I think is quite often overlooked, and it always seems to be quite a key requirement, especially when talking to communications teams and wanting to maintain control over the assets that people use when they're creating content on the intranet. So what we're going to look at now is organizational assets.
So I've come back to my SharePoint site, and for the purpose of this, I'm going to go to my HR comms site. Okay, so on my HR comms site, I'm going to go to site contents. I'm just going to go and create myself a new document library. and I'm going to call this org media. Let's go and create that. Okay, and I'm just going to go and grab a number of images, and I'm going to drop those into my organizational media. Okay, so while that's uploading, let's go back to PowerShell again, because unfortunately, again, this is one of those things that I need to disappear back to PowerShell for. So just like I did before, I need to connect to my SPO service first of all, and then I can use the commandlet add SPO org assets library. And it's asking me for two pieces of information. It's asking me for a library URL, and then if I want to provide a thumbnail URL, I can provide that as well. So let's go and grab the URL of the library that I've just created. And put that back into my PowerShell. And let's go and use an image for the thumbnail, so we can see where that's going to come through. So if I go to, let's go for my OneDrive. Okay, so I've got my commands prepared. What I'm going to do is, just so that I don't have to put all this on one line, I'm just going to go and put a backtick on each line. Let's go and run that. Because you're putting a backtick basically means I can go across multiple lines. Are you sure you want to perform this action? Yeah, of course. And what it's basically saying here is that I'm going to enable a tenant CDN, a content delivery network, and then add a new content delivery network origin. What a content developer network is a document library or a repository which is tuned to be able to serve content. So when I do this as organizational assets, it creates it as a private CDN, which means it's only accessible within the confines of my Office 365. There are ways that you can create public CDNs, for example out in Azure, but this is purely just for the use in Office 365. So I'm just going to say yes to that. Okay, and yep, that's all fine. So let's go back to my SharePoint site. So back on the perspective, let's give this a quick refresh. So I'm going to go and create a new page again. And when I go to new page, I'm going to go and select my visual one again, because that was quite pretty. Let's go and create that. This time, I'm going to click on change image. And I've got an additional option down here now. So I've got your organization. When I click on that, that's the image which I selected to be my organizational media, or to be my thumbnail, I should say. And when I click on org media, then it takes me into my document library and allows me to go and have a look at the content that I've got stored there. If I change that to tiles, I can then come and select what the image is that I want on my page. So in terms of communications teams, again, that's giving you governance over what the images are that people are using. It's allowing you to get your content out to everybody, but managing everything in a single place. So again, good big wins there for being able to get that content, being able to get that rich media out to all of your users.
So we've looked at some of what I consider the key elements of an intelligent intranet as offered by SharePoint Online. There is much more that I could have got into. However, in 45 minutes, they are the key things that I think are most worthy of being aware of. Obviously, there are a huge number of other things that I can bring into my SharePoint intranet. So all of the services that are existing within Office 365, I can consume in some way on my intranet. So for example, I can place stream videos directly into my page. I can bring my Power Apps directly into there, and I can transform my lists and library forms by using Power Apps as well. And I can bring my forms in to start to gather that feedback and bring in my Power BI dashboards. The limitations really are with what your imagination can really lend to your intranet design. There's a huge amount that you can do. And there's more on the way. So some of the key things that I think are worth just being aware of that are on the way are things like undo. Now this is rolling out at the moment. I've seen this in most tenancies now, so I think that's pretty much all the way complete in terms of the rollout. What I'm also now starting to see across some of my tenancies is that the stock images are appearing. So when I go to insert an image, I'll have all of those stock images that are available that I see within PowerPoint and Excel and Word and the Office suite. That will also be available for me to use on my intranet in SharePoint Online. We're also going to see improvements to the scheduling for news items, so being able to schedule them, making sure that they appear on a specific date and that they also expire on another date. And that's going to be something that's native to SharePoint, not something that we need to rely on the likes of Power Automate to be able to do that for us. We're also going to see multilingual pages coming through. Now when we say multilingual, it's going to have the same experience as what we see within Microsoft Forms, where I can have multiple renditions of my page, and I will need to provide the translations to the text in order for it to become multilingual. It's not something that's going to be done by machine translation. However, it will give me the option to go ahead and enter my own translations in there. So there's a lot of scope for improvements still that are still coming through. And really, if you've started that journey on your SharePoint Online intranet, then you're already in a good position. If you're not there yet and you're still thinking about it, then just consider all of the things that we've mentioned here over this last 45 minutes. In terms of the mobile responsiveness that we get immediately with SharePoint Online, the fact that it sits within our Office 365 tenancy, that it gives us that full governance bubble, that single sign-on experience, and the access to all those other services that I could really take advantage of within the Office 365 ecosystem as a whole. And just remember that everything that we do as well has elements of accessibility built in. So SharePoint and the Microsoft Teams in general really go to the nth degree to try and make your sites as accessible as possible without you having to do any work on that at all. So generally, that is our offering in SharePoint Online for 2020. It's getting better, and it's getting even more exciting with the likes of Project Cortex now starting to come in and modernise elements such as the Managed Metadata Service. So keep your eyes peeled on the Microsoft site for more information coming on that as well. Finally, just a few resources that will really help you with your SharePoint Intelligence intranet. The SharePoint Lookbook can be found at aka.ms SharePoint Lookbook. So it's always worthwhile going there, just having a general look around at the designs and just seeing what you can produce as a result of looking at those for inspiration. The Intrazone is one of my go-to resources for finding out anything new that's coming on with SharePoint, and that's aka.ms/the Intrazone. Or certainly the Microsoft Tech community, where I can find the latest blogs, and I can also ask for help from other people within the community who maybe have looked at shared the same pains in the past and are going to help me to get over my existing issues and move forward. So finally, one last thank you again to all of the sponsors. Thank you to all of you for watching, and certainly thank you to the M365 Madrid team in order to who've put all of this together and really made it possible to still have this despite currently being in the lockdown situation. So I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all got something from it. If you need anything, please do reach out and I'll be happy to help. Have a good day.